Just send the $10,000 and stay in the city. You are too depressing. It is the only way you are useful to this family. That was the text I got from my mother tonight. She wants me to fund my sister Jessica's victory party in the Hamptons, but she banned me from attending because I ruined the vibe. I stared at the phone. My mother thinks I'm still her boring ATM daughter. She has no idea I sold my software company today for $600 million. And she definitely doesn't know that the rental she booked for the party is sitting directly next door to the $12 million estate I just bought. I put the phone down next to the deed. The ATM is officially out of order. Have you ever been the one paying for everything, only to be treated like you are nothing? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. That text message wasn't just an insult. It was the summary of my entire existence. For the last decade, I haven't been a daughter to Patricia and Richard. I have been a utility, a walking, breathing line of credit. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the rain, remembering the years that built this moment, while my sister Jessica was finding herself in Italy on my dime. I was living in a basement apartment in Queens with no heat, coding until my eyes burned. I ate instant noodles for dinner, so I could send money home for their essentials. But their essentials always looked a lot like luxury. I remember when my father needed emergency heart surgery 3 years ago. His insurance wouldn't cover the specialist he wanted. I wired $40,000 within an hour of his call. I drained my savings account to zero. When he woke up, he didn't thank me. He looked at the receipt and complained that the wire transfer fee was too high. That was the dynamic. I gave until I bled, and they complained about the stain on the carpet. Then there was Jessica, the joy of the family. My parents worshipped her chaos. If I was the boring, reliable bank, she was the exciting startup that always crashed. First, it was a luxury candle line, then a drop-shipping business, then a lifestyle blog that required 5-star travel. Every single one failed, and every single time, I was the one who cleaned up the mess. Just last Christmas, I paid off $50,000 of her credit card debt because she was facing fraud charges. My parents didn't hug me. They hugged her. They told her how brave she was for trying. And then they looked at me and said, "Well, you can afford it, Aurora. It's the least you can do." The least I could do. Sitting there in my dark office, the realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't that they hated me. Hate would imply they saw me as a human being with feelings to hurt. It was worse than that. They had objectified me. I realized I was just a toaster to them. You don't invite a toaster to a dinner party. You don't ask a toaster how its day was. You don't love a toaster. You just keep it on the counter until you need it to work. And when it doesn't work, you don't feel sad. You feel annoyed. That text message from my mother wasn't a rejection. It was a user manual. Insert cash, then power down. For 30 years, I had been trying to buy their love, thinking if I just paid one more bill, if I just saved them one more time, they would finally look at me, the way they looked at Jessica. But you can't buy what isn't there. This realization didn't break my heart. It froze it. It turned my sadness into something cold and sharp. If I was just a business transaction to them, then fine. I would start treating them like a bad investment. And it was time to liquidate my assets. I wiped the tears I hadn't shed. Sadness is a luxury for people who can afford to be vulnerable, and in that moment, I realized I couldn't afford it anymore. I picked up my phone again. But this time, I didn't call my mother back to beg for an invite. I called my lawyer. "Marcus, I want to buy some debt," I said, my voice steady. Specifically, the mortgage note for 42 Oak Drive, Long Island. Marcus didn't ask why. He knows my family history better than my therapist does. He just started digging. 2 hours later, he called me back with a file that confirmed my suspicions. My parents weren't just mean. They were broke. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. They had drained their retirement savings, took out a second line of credit, and maxed out their cards, all to fund Jessica's influencer lifestyle and her string of failed businesses. The bank was preparing to foreclose. They were drowning. And the only reason they hadn't asked me for a bailout yet was because they wanted to maintain the illusion of control. They wanted to demand money from a position of power, not beg for it from a position of weakness. "Do you want to pay it off for them?" Marcus asked, assuming I was going to play the hero one last time. "No," I said. "I want to become the bank." We set up a shell company that night. I named it Athena Holdings. Through this faceless entity, I contacted their bank and offered to buy the non-performing note for cash. The bank, eager to offload a bad asset, agreed immediately. By the next morning, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their creditor. Then came the trap. Acting through an intermediary agent, Athena Holdings offered Patricia and Richard a restructuring deal. It looked like a miracle. We offered to lower their monthly payments and inject immediate cash to stop the foreclosure process. It was exactly the kind of lifeline arrogant people think they deserve. But buried in the dense legal language of the contract was a single, devastating clause. A confession of judgment. In New York law, a confession of judgment is the nuclear weapon of debt collection. It essentially says that the debtor admits liability in advance. If they miss a single payment, or violate any term of the agreement, the creditor doesn't have to sue them. The creditor doesn't have to take them to trial. The creditor can simply walk into a clerk's office, file the affidavit, and seize their assets instantly. It bypasses the entire legal system. I sat in my office and watched the tracking on the document sent to their email. I saw when they opened it. I saw how quickly they scrolled past the terms and conditions. They didn't read it. They were too busy celebrating. They probably thought they had tricked this new, stupid lender into giving them more time. They thought they had won. A notification popped up on my screen. Document. Signed. Patricia and Richard. I looked at their digital signatures, glowing on my monitor. They had just signed away their safety. They had handed the keys to their life to the daughter they called useless. I clicked save and closed the file. The trap wasn't just set. They had already walked into it. Now, I just had to wait for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving morning in the Hamptons broke cold and clear, the kind of day that snaps your lungs awake. The air smelled of salt spray from the ocean, and wood smoke from the $50,000 fire pit in my backyard. My estate, which I'd quietly named the Olympus, sat like a fortress behind 12-foot iron gates. Inside, the house was alive. Caterers were moving with military precision, setting up a feast for 50 people. These weren't random socialites or business contacts. This was my chosen family, my college roommate who let me sleep on her floor, the mentor who invested in my first failed startup and told me to keep going. Friends who knew my middle name and my coffee order, not just my net worth. I stood on the second-floor balcony with a glass of champagne, watching the driveway monitors. It was peaceful. Until my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Did you send the money yet? The caterer is asking for the confirmation number." "Don't embarrass us, Aurora." Then, a text from Jessica followed immediately. Don't be petty. Just zell it. We are almost at the rental. It's going to be so chic. Don't make this about you." I looked at the messages and felt a cold, dark amusement. They were driving out to the Hamptons, dressed in their designer rentals, expecting a party funded by the daughter they despised. They thought they were heading to a luxury Airbnb to celebrate Jessica's success. They didn't know I had canceled that rental deposit 3 weeks ago. The card on file was mine, after all. If they showed up at that address, they'd find a locked door and a confused homeowner. But I didn't want them to go there. I wanted them here. I typed a reply to my mother. I didn't send a confirmation number. I sent a single geolocation pin. "I'm not sending the money electronically," I wrote. "Come pick up the check in person. I'm at the big house on Dune Road. The one with the black gates." I watched the read receipt pop up. Then the 3 dots of typing. Then nothing. They were probably fuming. They probably thought I had rented a place for myself to show off. Or maybe that I was working as a house sitter. It never once occurred to them that I could own a property on Billionaire's Lane. In their minds, I was still the broke coder in the basement. 10 minutes later, the security sensors tripped. I looked at the bank of high-definition monitors on my wall. A beat-up Range Rover leased, and 2 months behind on payments turned onto my private drive. It looked small and dirty against the pristine white gravel. They were driving fast. Aggressive. They thought they were coming to scold a disobedient child. They thought they were going to yell at me, grab the check, and drive off to their party. They had no idea they were driving straight into a courtroom, and I was the judge. The Range Rover screeched to a halt inches from the ironwork. My father, Richard, didn't even park properly. He just threw the door open and marched toward the keypad. My mother followed, her heels clicking on the pavement, looking ready to dismantle the gate with her bare hands. Jessica stayed by the car for a second to check her reflection in the window, fixing her hair before storming after them. Inside the estate, the mood shifted instantly. I signaled the DJ to cut the music. "Everyone," I said, my voice calm over the gentle hum of the room. "I think my family has arrived. I'd like you to meet them." I pressed a button on my tablet. The massive projection screen on the living room wall flickered to life. The high-definition security feed beamed into the room, crisp and clear. 50 of my closest friends, mentors, and colleagues turned to watch. They saw my parents, distorted by the wide-angle lens, their faces twisted into masks of pure entitlement. "Open this gate, Aurora." My father's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, distorted by static but unmistakable. He slammed his hand against the call box. "We know you're in there. You think this is funny? Locking us out of our own rental? Richard, call the police." My mother shrieked, leaning into the camera. "She's squatting. She probably broke in." That girl is mentally unstable. She's off her meds again. I haven't taken medication since I was 16, and that was for the anxiety they caused. But the lie hung in the air, ugly and desperate. Jessica pushed past them, her face filling the screen. "You are ruining my content day," she screamed. "You jealous, bitter little leech. You stole that $10,000, didn't you? That's why you're hiding in here. You probably rented this place for an hour just to flex." The room was deadly silent. My college roommate, Zoe, who had held me while I cried over these people for years, looked physically ill. My former professor took off his glasses and wiped them, staring at the screen in disbelief. They weren't seeing parents concerned for a wayward child. They were seeing predators trying to break down a door. My family thought they were screaming at a locked gate. They didn't realize they were screaming into a microphone, broadcasting their cruelty to the very people who respected me most. Their hubris was absolute. They felt safe in their aggression because they thought no one was watching but the victim. I walked to the French doors and stepped out onto the second-floor balcony. The cold air hit my face. Below me, outside the gates, they were still screaming. It was time to answer. I stepped up to the microphone stand I had set up on the balcony. It was connected to the estate's PA system, usually reserved for garden parties or announcements. Today, it was for sentencing. "I didn't steal anything," I said. My voice didn't need to be loud. The speakers carried it over the manicured lawn, through the iron bars, and right into the open windows of their Range Rover. "But you're right about one thing, Richard. I did spend some money recently." My father stopped banging on the gate. He looked up, squinting against the floodlights I had just engaged. He couldn't see me clearly, just a silhouette against the warmth of the house. But he knew that voice. He knew the tone. It was the same tone I used when I told him I wouldn't pay for his golf club membership 3 years ago. "Who are you talking to?" he shouted, trying to assert control. "Come down and open this gate. You're humiliating this family." "No," I said calmly. "I'm educating it." I tapped my tablet. Inside the house, the projection changed. At the same time, a hidden projector lit up the stone pillar by the gate beside my mother. It wasn't a check. It was a legal document, the signature page of the debt restructuring agreement they had signed 2 weeks earlier. Their names glowed 10 feet tall for the neighbors to see. "Do you recognize that?" I asked. My mother froze. Jessica stared, confused, phone still in hand. "That's a confession of judgment," I said. "You thought Athena Holdings was a faceless lender. You didn't read the paperwork. If you had, you would have seen my name." I leaned over the railing. "I am Athena Holdings." The driveway went dead silent. My father's knees buckled as he grabbed the gate. "I bought your debt," I continued flatly. "Your mortgage. Your second mortgage. The lien on the Range Rover. And because you missed your first payment because you spent it on a party, you're in default. For 30 years, they controlled love like currency. If I paid, I belonged. If I didn't, I was erased. They thought entitlement never expired, but the currency had changed. You called me a wallet," I said. "Fine. Today, the wallet is foreclosing." I tapped once more. The screen updated to a live filing. "Notice of eviction and seizure. The sheriff has been notified," I said. "You have 90 minutes to collect what you can. At midnight, the locks change." My mother screamed. My father collapsed into the gravel. Jessica whispered, "My things." "Better start driving," I said. "Traffic's bad tonight." No one inside the house cheered. They watched in stunned silence as the Range Rover peeled away, racing a clock they had created. Later, a text came through. "We're family. You can't do this." I typed back slowly. "You're right. Family wouldn't do this. But a bank would. And that's all I ever was to you." I sent it. Then I blocked them all. They lost the house that night. I spent Christmas in the Hamptons, by the fire, with people who never asked me for money or made me feel small. Outside, the iron gate stood firm. For years, it had looked like a prison. Now, it looked like a shield. If you've ever had to become the villain just to survive, you're not alone.